Great. I was having so much fun in my last meeting, I almost forgot to join this one.
We're glad you're here. Hope everyone got that email with the updated link this morning. And I did want to note we have some backup support for administrative services today, so bear with us if anything doesn't go quite according to plan. We're working on this as we go.
Building the plane as we're flying it a little bit today.
Indeed.
Okay. Well, let's call the meeting to order for the Washington County Coordinating Committee, Monday, January 9th, 2023. Stephen, did we happen to have any public comments?
We didn't have anyone who signed up earlier today. I'll give just a moment if there's anyone in the attendees that would be interested in providing a comment. You can use your raise hand feature. Not seeing any hands.
Nope, I'm not seeing any either. Well, let's take ourselves into introductions, roll call, meeting calendar, and protocol. Stephen, you already confirmed we have a quorum. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. This is our first meeting of 2023. I wanted to welcome that we have two new mayors for Washington County Coordinating membership. And I'm looking through to see if I see Mayor Wenzel. Maybe she's off my screen. Let's see Mayor Wenzel. And then also we have a new mayor from Tigard. Mayor Wenzel's from Forest Grove. And then from Tigard is Heidi Loop. I think the outstanding opportunity we have now is that 8 of our 14 Washington County Coordinating voting members are now women. So yes, Mayor Callaway.
I would like to also acknowledge new Mayor Rosner from Sherwood. And I also want to say that just because we have new mayors does not make the rest of us old mayors. We are experienced, we are seasoned, we are wise, you know.
You know, I'm just Tim's been with us for a while, and I totally skipped over that. But thanks for catching that, Steve. That's a good one. Tim, welcome to your new position. Did you get sworn in last week then?
Yep, sworn in on the 3rd. Thank you, and thank you, Steve and Jeff. I promise not to take it personally that you forgot me.
You know, you've just been with us so much lately. I just thought you were here.
No,
okay.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
And I don't see her. Oh, there's Heidi. There she is. Hi, welcome. For the benefit of the new mayors, could we take a quick trip around the room? Stephanie?
Hey Jones, Mayor, City of Banks.
Jamie?
Jamie Fender, Mayor of King City. Welcome.
Frank Bubenik.
Morning, Frank Bubenik, City of Tualatin.
I'm going to even hit some of the staff too. Stephen, you want to introduce yourself?
Happy to. I'm Stephen Roberts. I'm the Director of Land Use and Transportation for Washington County, and my role here is serving as the Secretary for the Washington County Coordinating Committee. So welcome to the new mayors as well.
Matt Freitag.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Matt Freitag. I'm ODOT's area manager responsible for Washington County in the project delivery section.
Great. Terry Lenahan.
Hi, Terry Lenahan, City of North Plains. Welcome, everyone.
Lacey.
Lacey Beatty, Mayor of the City of Beaverton. I would also like to take this moment to point a few things out since Steve took the opportunity. I have never seen him wear a hooded sweatshirt to a meeting ever, so I'm glad to know that Beaverton is having a little bit of influence in the region here, and welcome to Team Comfort, Mayor Callaway.
That's a good one. Nafisa.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Nafisa Fai, Washington County Commissioner.
Welcome. Mayor Callaway, Steve.
So I'm in touch with my inner John Fetterman today, and also thinking that if it takes 15 votes, you know, to decide on the new WCCC chair, I wanted to be comfortable. Anyway, Callaway, Hillsborough, good to see you all. Happy New Year.
How about Gary?
Gary Sherrato, Mayor Durham.
Heidi.
Heidi Lube, City of Tigard.
Chris.
This Chris. Chris Steffenbach, Senior Policy Analyst with Washington County, and I help put the agenda together in support of the chair and vice chair.
She says that like it's nothing big to do, but without her, I don't think we'd pull this meeting off, and Stephen also, and the other staff from the county. Tim?
Tim Rosner, City of Sherwood, and just glad to be here and looking forward to working with everybody.
Okay, I'm gonna pause there and move on. I'm sure the others will get a chance when they do presentations to introduce themselves. Anyone I'm missing on the phone, overlooked?
Don't believe so.
I think that's it. Okay, one modification on the agenda today. I propose moving, based on preparation, the ODOT and TriMet updates on the RTP project lists. Move those until February. They need a little more time to prepare, and that gives us some time today to work more on the high capacity transit strategy update for the regional transportation plan. Any concerns with that? Okay. Attachments were our roster, the calendar for the rest of the year. This is a little odd because the holiday next week, we're meeting a week early, right? So note that. And then the Zoom protocols. Action items. Our first action item is consideration of the Washington County Coordinating Meeting Summary for December 12th, 2022. Any comments, adjustments?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Mayor Bubenik. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm going to give the second to Mayor Jones. Sorry, Lacey.
I think she earned that one.
Tie goes to the runner, right? Okay, great. So motion second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Oh, Mayor Lanahan, noted. All right, that passes, not unanimously, but does pass. Next up is the Washington County Coordinating Chair Confirmation and Vice Chair Election. My last and hopefully final act as chair today would be to confirm that we're transitioning to Mayor Bubenik. That is not a given, but it is our protocol to take the vice to the chair position. Frank indicated last month that he was willing and able to take this opportunity. So if there's no further concerns, seeing nobody dive for the raised hand or making comments, Frank, congratulations. You're the chair. Out of here.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Jeff. All right. With that, we now have to select a vice chair. I haven't heard anybody shoot me any emails, and Jeff hasn't heard anything. Is there anyone who would like to nominate one of us for the vice chair position? Mayor Beatty.
Thank you. I didn't ask them, but I'm going to do it anyways, because that's just the style of what this is. Thinking about the mayors in this room that have significant leadership roles, both Steve Calloway does, Terry Lanahan and myself hopefully is taking the helm of the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium. And given our earlier news of how many women sit at the table at this group, I think we should consider Jamie Fender as the vice chair.
All right. Jamie, are you okay with that? Will you accept the nomination?
So that was a surprise, but thank you, Mayor Beatty, and I would be happy to serve. No.
Right.
That's how we get you. We just spring it on you.
That's fine. The best way.
We all stepped backwards and you were in front. Lacey knows what that means too. Any other nominations?
And Chair, if I could for just one moment, I just wanted to acknowledge Mayor Wenzel has just joined as well. And so I wanted to just catch her up to speed. We're actually taking nominations if anyone's interested in serving as committee vice chair right now.
And right now we have Mayor Fender of King City who's been nominating. Any other nominations? See, look how you can get things done in one vote here, Steve. We need to go to DC and show them how it's done. So I don't think we need to have a vote considering there's only one nominee. So Mayor Fender, do you accept the nomination and the position?
I accept. Thank you.
All right, congratulations. That brings us up to item C, the Region 1 Act Stakeholder Representative nominations. Per the Region 1 Act bylaws, the Washington County Coordinating Committee is responsible for nominations of our stakeholder representatives to Region 1 Act. With Mayor Snyder's and Truax stepping down, we now have 2 vacancies. One position is for the term ending in June. In June, we'll have the opportunity to revisit this nomination as well as consider one other stakeholder whose term will be ending later in the year. That vacancy will be ending in 2027. So in our discussions offline, I'm aware of 2 folks who are interested in being taken the position. One is Mayor Lube, and the other is former Mayor Keith Mays. Are there other folks who are interested in filling those positions? Mayor Beatty.
I fully want to support Heidi, and I definitely want to do that. But I think Keith made a very deliberate decision of stepping back because of responsibilities. And my preference would be to nominate somebody that's coming from this group, since we have so much conversations and stuff coming out of here. I'm happy to make another surprise nomination, but I would put that out there for our group conversation. While I value his input, we know how much we do in these groups, and having a more connection to us, I think, would be my preference.
Okay, so what's your nomination?
Was anyone interested in serving, or do we want me to surprise nominate somebody? Because I think the last mayor to sign in and our newest mayor of Forest Grove would get my immediate nomination. But again, that's just a surprise nomination.
Mayor Rosner has his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to add, thank you, Mayor Beatty, for that. Keith and I talked about this for a long time. He's now officially the council president for Sherwood, and he will be backing me up on this committee. It's part of our plan to have a smooth transition as Keith steps down to council president and as I step up to mayor. So he will be, I'll be working hard to keep him in the loop, and you'll probably be seeing him occasionally in these meetings as well.
Right. So it sounds like we have 3 nominations. Mayor, Council President Mays, got to get used to that. Mayor Wenzel and Mayor Lube. Mayor Callaway.
So a quick question, because I know that Region 1 Act meets on Monday nights, and Mayor Wenzel is there, and I'm assuming there is no conflict with Forest Grove's meeting since Mayor Truax, attended Region 1 Act, but I just want to confirm that Region 1 Act is on non-Forest Grove City Council meeting evenings.
Yeah, so the Forest Grove City Council meets on the 2nd and 4th. So as long as it's not that, then I'm good.
I think some geographical diversity in our representation, I think, would be important as well.
Okay. And Mayor Wenzel, you're willing to accept the nomination?
Yeah, I think I am. It was a surprise, but I'm all about surprises. I like it.
Mayor Rosner.
I failed to put my hand down. I'm sorry, but I will add that, as Keith and I talked about, and as I think about it, geographic representation is important, as well as Keith does have a deep understanding of the issues that committee will be taking on in transportation in our region. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. So we've got 3 candidates for 2 positions. Don't know if this matters, but the 2 folks that are here, who would be interested in filling a position that expires in June? Because one expires in June and one expires in, I believe, in 27. So who would want to take the short one and then be renominated in June for that position? So between Mayor Wenzel and Mayor Lube, would you?
I don't mind taking the short. the short one.
Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to look at, I know this is not a, do we want to do this by email? You want to do by hand? What's the preference of the committee about voting?
Can I ask a preference? And I
Sure.
had the same question when we were well, I didn't ask it, but I've reflected on it since we voted for the TPAC representative. Since this is an elected body that produces minutes, is voting on secret ballot a violation of public record meeting laws?
I'll toss that to Stephen and Chris.
It's a good question, Mayor. I don't know that the bylaws really address that specifically, but I take your point that we have in the past accepted nominations via email. And of course, then we come back and we'll announce the results in a public meeting. So without doing some further research, I think we're okay there, but I take your point. And if it's the committee's preference, I'll defer maybe to the chair and the committee members. If you have an interest in taking those votes in the public meeting, I think that's certainly something that can be entertained.
All right. I see Mayor Lube's hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I realized that you said I was interested, but I wanted to vocalize I'm very interested in this role, and my preference would be the longer term, but I would certainly be open to serving in the shorter one.
All right. And Tim, you still have your hand up. Thank you. All right, so what's the preference of the committee? Because I don't want to be dictatorial here. Would you rather have a email vote or a hand vote? Mayor Beatty?
I would prefer a hand vote. I think transparency is pivotal, and I think we should rectify our rules immediately, because I do believe that the Oregon Ethics Commission might not agree with the assessment that voting that way is appropriate.
All right, so we'll vote first for the shorter. Well, I guess, should we do by the shorter or just get two of the three?
I'm happy to start with a nomination if that's helpful. I nominate Mayor Lube for the long seat and Mayor Wenzel for the short seat.
All right.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor of Mayor Lube for the long seat and Mayor Wenzel for the short seat?
Do we need a
raise your
nomination?
hand. What's
I
that?
apologize. Do we need a nomination for Keith Mays?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, I'd just like to nominate Keith Mays. And I'm sure he would be fine with either the long-term or short-term seat.
Okay, so how are we going to do three people then? So you'd have to make, God, my first meeting, you're making it tough. Now we are going into those 15 votes. All right. Let's see. Because I'm so used to doing this as a written ballot in city council, and then they're read, so it's kind of odd. So let's go ahead. We had the motion, and did I have a second on Mayor Beatty's motion?
We did. It was Jamie Fender.
All right. So we have a motion. Was there any other motions or an amendment to that motion for the two candidates? Mayor Jones has her hand up.
I'm just asking, is it possible, Stephen, for us to have one of those little Zoom polls that has all three names and people can vote for a first choice? And then the top two, we then decide between the long and the short?
That might be possible, but as I mentioned earlier, we're running a little shy on support today. So I would suggest if we're going to do something like that, we may need to take that up in a separate meeting, maybe in February.
Just to quickly interrupt, Stephen, that feature would have to be enabled before the meeting started.
Okay. Thank you, Chuck.
All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go name by name. I think that's the fairest way with hands up, and the top two are the two positions. So I'll start off with all those in favor of Mayor Lube.
Chair Bubenik, just for my own notes here, I wanted to confirm, did we have a second for Mayor Rosner's motion?
I believe so. Do we have a second for Mayor Rosner's?
I will second it.
Yep.
Thank you.
And point of order, I think if we have a motion on the floor, we have to vote on the motion, correct, before we amend it to vote on the second nomination?
I might suggest if there's an interest, maybe someone putting forward a nomination to put forward all three candidates.
I think for the record, it needs to be clarified.
Move that we put forward all three candidates and that we'll vote by a show of hands. Top two take the positions.
I have a quick question. Is this
Second.
just the cities voting or all the members of?
All.
Okay.
All voting members of WCCC.
Point of order on that. Washington County appoints their own rep.
The bylaws call for the WCC to nominate.
Really? Okay.
The R1 Act bylaws.
All right. So I've got three motions out there. I've got Mayor Beatty's motion, I have Mayor Roser's motion, and I have Mayor DeLin's motion. So I've got three competing motions.
I'll withdraw my
with-
motion. in
I can
favor.
withdraw my motion. If you want to take a voice count, I can withdraw my motion, but I think like you probably should go. This is not how Robert's rules work, and not that we have been extremely like rigid here, but I do think like voting in person publicly is important. So if, as the chair, if you want to default to name call who people want, like I can withdraw my motion.
All right. How about you, Tim? And we go with Jeff's motion.
Yeah, I would, let me get my screen back here.
And then I believe we'll also need a second for Mayor Delane's motion.
I think
Yeah,
Mayor Lenahan did that.
Yeah, I threw out a second for Jeff and I withdraw my earlier motion.
All
My
right.
second was on Tim's motion, Frank.
Right. So now we're down to one motion, Mayor DeLin's. We have three nominees. We're going to do a vote. I'll start with my neighbor with Mayor Lube. So show of hands for Mayor Lube to take one of the positions. And let Stephen get a count here, please.
So I would appreciate if someone can check me. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
All right.
That's what I got. 11.
All right. And then we'll move to Mayor Wenzel.
Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Question, how many times are we allowed to vote on this?
You vote for two.
You vote for two, okay.
Okay, let's count again.
Okay.
Everyone raise your hands for Wenzel.
2,
Vote early, vote often.
4, 6, 7, 8. I count 8.
I did too.
And the last candidate is City
Mays.
Council President Mays.
Okay, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.
All right. There you have it. So congratulations, Mayor Wenzel and Mayor Lube on being the Region 1 Act representatives, and with Mayor Wenzel taking the short term. All right, got through that one. Now we're coming up to item number D, an MSTIP Opportunity Fund request, and this is for the Salmonberry Trail, and Erin Wardell will do the presentation. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Mayor Bubenik. My name is Erin Wardell. I'm the Planning and Development Services Division Manager at Washington County. We have a MSTIP Opportunity Fund request today coming from Washington County. We are applying for an Oregon Community Pass grant on behalf of the Salmonberry Trail Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Salmonberry Trail is envisioned as a future trail connection from the city of Banks all the way out to the city of Tillamook. And so it'll be an 87-mile trail someday. This grant would support engineering design up to 30% of an approximately 3-mile loop of this trail. So we're asking for $65,000 from MSTIP Opportunity Funds to support a $695,000 grant ask. The WCCC TAC recommended approval at their last meeting for this grant. And we have Diami Valentine, a Washington County Senior Trails Planner, who usually specializes in trails, online if we have any questions about this or about MSTIP Opportunity Fund in general.
Questions? I'll just resurface a question I had last week, Chris, about this opportunity fund money from last year's and how much is left versus, I should say, last cycle versus this cycle. Did you have a chance to check with Diami about the if there's any money left over from last cycle and which this is being pulled from?
We have it summarized in the memo. The Opportunity Fund balance as of now is $5.6 million. Early in 22, we asked the board to authorize a placeholder amount of $7.5 million going forward for these types of requests until they can approve the next MSTIP funding allocation cycle. So we do have funding available.
Okay. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Callaway.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussions? All those in favor of approving this MSTIP Opportunity Fund request, go ahead and raise your hand or say aye, or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. All right. That brings us to item 4A, high capacity transit study update. Metro staff will present an update on the HCT, and I believe it's going to be Allie Holmquist is going to be doing the presentation for Washington County. We've got our PowerPoint to go through. As we mentioned, we're not going to touch item number letter C, so we have more than the initial 20 minutes. We have about 40 minutes for discussion because I think it's going to be there'll be a lot of questions. So take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm Allie Holmquist. I'm from Metro, and I'm going to be talking about the high capacity transit strategy update that we've been working on with TriMet and also with a working group of regional stakeholders as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick here to jump right in. Perfect. So hopefully you can see a PowerPoint now. And I just wanted to mention that we last came forward with this update in fall. So I'll talk a little bit about, or recap a little bit about what we presented at that time. And thank you so much for having me back too. So in the fall, when we last spoke about this update, we were talking about the work that we were doing to establish and reestablish the high capacity transit policy framework and the work that we were doing to develop the high capacity transit network vision. And since then, we've buttoned up that work, and really it was to better reflect the role of high capacity transit as the backbone of the regional transportation plan and the 2040 growth concept, really connecting town and regional centers through corridors. And so we also, as part of that work, touched on, as you can see here, some of the characteristics of an optimal network, features that make it high capacity, and the elements that are required to make high capacity transit successful. Sorry, a little double click there. The other thing that we did was reflect how Rapid Bus has provided an opportunity to think differently about what the region's high capacity transit network could look like in the future. Because it can be a more flexible, cost-effective solution, and it can allow projects to move through the federal development process more quickly. And I also mention this because it's important to remember that high capacity transit is only one part of our broader transit strategy. It plays a specific role moving many people quickly along major travel corridors to grow or elevate transit service. And we still know there's a lot of regional work to do, thinking about filling gaps where we would like to see additional transit service, growing that service along the spectrum to more frequent and to have better bus enhancements for more priority in the roadway to enhance speed and reliability, in addition to growing transit to be high capacity. At the fall, we were also working together to refine the vision, as I mentioned. And I just want to speak to how critical that plan for the future is to seeing the network and investments we want to see for the future implemented in a way that best supports regional goals and priorities. So we talked about how we grew from the existing MAX system today, and we really have that because of earlier planning work that's been done, the 2009 high capacity transit plan, but really much more in the past before that as well. And so what we did is, in addition to expanding on that past work, we thought about ways that we could rethink what that network could look like, expanding it with rapid bus. And so we, in addition to meeting with you and Metro's advisory committees and some public outreach, we heard a lot of different points. First of all, continuing to support established regional high capacity transit priorities. So really focusing on, Southwest Corridor, the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project and the transit element of that, TV Highway and 82nd Avenue Rapid Bus, and Montgomery Park streetcar as well. We also heard an interest in a focus on ridership, land use supportiveness, accessibility, and cost effectiveness when thinking about which corridors are identified in the near term for investment. And then also thinking about, for those longer term investment opportunities, thinking about how we could address gaps in the network supporting the 2040 growth concept blueprint for development in the future. And then we heard a lot of support for different north-south and east-west connections across the region, between Hillsborough and the central city, for instance, between Beaverton and Wilsonville, between Washington and Clackamas counties as well. And so we went through all of that feedback together with the working group to consider refinements to the vision. And then we also went through a policy check together just to make sure that the vision was meeting the intended outcomes that we established in the policy framework. And then with those established vision corridors, we next assessed their readiness for high capacity transit investment based on an approach developed from that policy framework I mentioned, again, with the working group. And this is really the crux of the work that we completed. It provides the framework to guide future investments in high capacity transit for decades, for the regional transportation plan, and even beyond that, thinking about the next time frame of the growth concept. And then it also helps us create a pipeline prioritizing those investments to clearly articulate what they are to FTA, Federal Transit Administration, and support our competitiveness for federal funding. So really forging the path towards realizing the vision that we worked so hard to establish, and think about ways that we can best take advantage of a larger pot for small starts, And then just a reminder that to do that, we built on an approach based on past work and strong policy planning, again, reflecting the investment priorities around the goal areas in the regional transportation plan, and then also considering additional factors related to federal grant program eligibility. And then looking at other factors of readiness that would be a little bit more qualitative and quantitative as well. And then together, those really helped us see which corridors rose to the top as far as readiness. So a couple of the key areas that we looked at, similar to the feedback we received, we heard land use supportiveness and market potential being really important. So we looked at a number of factors there: equity, benefit, and access, mobility and supporting mobility, thinking about fiscal stewardship, so looking at productivity and cost effectiveness, and then environmental benefit as well. So I'll go through these really quickly, but I just wanted to show visually, especially since there was so much interest at our JPAC Council workshop, of how once we apply these different measures, you can start to see the corridors that filter to the top. So for land use supportiveness, we were looking at things like population and employment density, where the most people are living and the jobs are, as well as where affordable housing is located, and higher educational institutions. And then also where the most people are riding today. And then as a different indicator of need, where travel time takes a lot more time via transit rather than car. And then also, as I mentioned, looking at equity access as well. So where historically marginalized communities are living and where they're likely to go. So looking at where essential destinations and jobs are as well. And then as far as those qualitative factors, we looked at a number of different ways to consider documented support. So we were looking at transit supportive transportation plans, identifying these corridors, land use policies and comprehensive plans. We looked a little bit about at the physical conditions of the corridor. So thinking about where there's an opportunity to provide space for transit priority, or where space for transit priority could really provide more capacity in the roadway to move more people. And then thinking about access for people walking and bicycling too, whether there's sidewalks and bicycle facilities there planned. And then we looked a little bit at just the complexity of implementation, the length of corridors, thinking about where there might need to be some splitting as part of corridor planning in the future. And then also the percentage of the corridor as identified as a freight corridor. So thinking about for maybe hole in the air routes where there's some additional regulations. And then again, just visually, when thinking about some of those physical conditions of the roadway factors, we were also again seeing some corridors filter to the top. And so we dusted off the tiering structure as far as establishing what the investment priority framework would be that was established in 2009 and revisited in 2018. And we made some changes in line with what we heard. So for tier 1, we established those as really being those regional priorities that are already underway. Again, Southwest Corridor, TV Highway, 82nd Avenue Rapid Bus, Interstate Bridge, and Montgomery Park Streetcar. They have an active and adopted LPA or are working towards one now, locally preferred alternative. So we're really, these are the ones that we're planning for these right now. And then for the second tier then, these are where we saw the highest scores demonstrating clear readiness for planning activities that could start in the next 5 years. Once we move through the tier 1 projects, what we would want to look at next. And really given our preliminary assumptions about the funding strategy for the RTP, these tier 1 and 2 areas are likely to be where the scale of the constrained and strategic investments. And then so as far as the tier 3 for developing corridors, this is where we're seeing some readiness today, but we're really needing more time to advance transit supportive policies or let those policies come to fruition. And this is where along the spectrum, we're still going to want to be pursuing better bus investments in the near term while we're working on growing those corridors. And then finally for tier 4, that these are still the really important connections for the future to support the 2040 growth concept, but just aren't quite ready for this highest form of highest capacity transit investment. And so there's some work to be done in growing transit in other ways using the other tools in the toolbox on our spectrum. And so the results are this map here showing the different tiers applied across the region. And then just to quickly touch on what those are for Washington County, beyond Southwest Corridor and TV Highway and Tier 1, as I'd mentioned already. For Tier 2, really a regional project is the Central City Tunnel, which will allow for any expansions to the light rail system and improve the speed and reliability of the existing system. And then we also have the Beaverton to Gresham corridor in the vicinity of Burnside, Bethany to Beaverton in the vicinity of Southwest 185th, and Beaverton to Portland in the vicinity of Beaverton Hillsdale Highway. For those developing corridors, we still have some work to do, but we're seeing some readiness, is the Sunset Transit Center to Hillsborough, in the vicinity of Highway 26, and then 2 other connections originally identified in our 2009 plan from Beaverton through to Oregon City, and then from Beaverton curving over through Tigard, Lake Oswego, Milwaukee to the Clackamas Town Center. And then finally, for the important future connections, we have Tiger to Sherwood in the vicinity of Highway 99 West, and then also some improvements between Beaverton and Wilsonville in the vicinity of West, which could improve or include a number of different solutions. And then I'll also mention too, Hillsborough to Forest Grove, in addition to the TV Highway Rapid Bus project, there's an additional opportunity for a future light rail extension as well. And so that's a separate project that's considered here. And so lastly, before I wrap up, I just wanted to mention that we'll be doing very similar engagement as we did last fall this month. So we'll be back in front of all of the committees. We'll also be launching a story map in mid-January in time to team up with TriMet for tabling activities again this month. 2 of those will be in Hillsborough and Tigard. They'll be centered around their 2023 annual service plan. We're going to be following up with TriMet's Committee on Accessible Transportation and Equity Advisory Committee as well. We're putting together a couple of focus groups with small business organizations throughout the region. A number that includes the Tigard Chamber, Westside Economic Alliance, Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs as well. And then we're also doing additional events with community-based organizations in conjunction with the Regional Transportation Plan update that'll be happening over the next several months. And then the last thing I'll mention before the final next steps is we'll be also working on a report again with our working group that just brings together all the work that we've done so far, talking a little bit about what we did, why it's important, and then really focusing on what we can do to support implementing the vision we've established and best set up future activities as part of corridor planning, as well as areas for future study, one of which we know will be really important is thinking about access to transit and providing additional connections to the high capacity transit network. And so we'll be working on that in the spring before we propose coming back to you in May. And that's where, after that is where the process will merge with the Regional Transportation Plan as we look towards adoption at the end of the year. So with that, thank you so much again for having me. I will stop there for feedback and questions.
All right. Questions?
Yes, Chair Alley, this is Gary Sherrato from Durham. I do have a question for you. I'm not sure which slide to refer us to go back to, but I think probably around number 3 or number 4, actually any of the slides that show the mapping of routes, but I'm thinking 3 or 4 is probably where I noticed it first. Could we go back there?
Yes, of course. Let me reshare my screen. Okay, is this the one that you're thinking of?
Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's as good as any, I think. It's not the clearest one on my screen so far, but nonetheless, my question is there, or can you give us an explanation as to why the city of Durham has been completely eliminated from any of the map routes that you have shown so far? Are we going to be excluded from any of these corridors, from any of these transportation opportunities? You know, we're just not there on any of your maps.
Oh, thank you so much. That's a great question. The circles on these maps are not necessarily all of the cities, and in fact, there's some changes to be made too, actually, because Damascus actually has had some changes since then. But these are the centers and from the 2040 growth concept. So they're a little bit different. They usually do follow the cities. That concept was done a number of years ago, and actually we are due for an update soon in the future. So it's less about the cities and more about the regional centers. And so that's the difference between the circles on this map and the cities throughout the region.
Okay, I'm still not sure that that answers my question. Is there a reason why Durham, for example, is not on this map, but Lake Grove is?
Yes, so that it is because we use the centers rather than the cities, and so Durham isn't right now a regional center on that map. We did look at, and one of the things that we did in our policy framework was we weren't looking to necessarily connect all of the centers for high capacity transit, because it is the highest form of transit on the spectrum. We were looking at connecting the areas that had the greatest draw and need and regional along regional travel corridors. So we were looking at connecting regional centers, which are places like, for instance, Hillsborough being having more of the employment and some of the more dense neighborhoods that we're seeing, with some of the town centers, which are a little bit smaller, like say Forest Grove, but mostly the major town centers that tend to be a little bit bigger, have maybe a little bit more jobs, and also maybe a little bit denser of neighborhoods. And this is just for the high capacity transit for the light rail and then rapid bus as well. They're the broader transit strategy. So thinking about transit in general, or frequent transit, so bus connections, shuttle connections as well. Those are more broad than the high capacity transit strategies. So these are really where we're seeing those kind of major draws for people traveling that would necessitate in the future more likely a light rail or rapid bus solution rather than maybe a bus connection, or even right below that an enhanced bus connection that does have higher priority. So there's still a lot of tools in the toolbox we're using, and we have a broader transit strategy that includes a lot more lines for those different tools as well.
Okay, I kind of understand that, but somebody looking at this map or any of the other maps, based upon what you've said, Damascus, which doesn't exist anymore, you've got as a transit center, but you don't have Durham on the map. So explain how that works.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's something that we could refine in our materials for sure, because we could be putting the city locations as well. So I really appreciate that feedback.
Well, I hope you do, and thank you.
Mayor Sherardo, maybe you just need to rename Durham to Damascus. You know, you have the same initial letter beginning out. It just seems like it might be an easy change.
Well, I would potentially suggest that, but we all know what happened to Paul on the road to Damascus. So I'm not so sure that we want that to happen to us.
All right. I can see a handful of hands because the presentation's blocking to my view, but I see Steven's got his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make sure to let you know that Mayor Fitzgerald has joined by phone. So she is with us on the call as well. And then I did have one just suggestion. As I was listening to the presentation, Allie, you mentioned pole in the air requirements. That might warrant a little bit of explanation too for some of the committee members. That's a sort of a term of art. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, and it's a little bit broader than that, but basically it's where, when we're looking at certain corridors, there are other, particularly ODOT and state requirements that are based on, because they're really large trucks that are going through the corridors, the streetscape, the roadway requirements for lane width, and some of the different elements of the roadway are a little bit different because they're accommodating those much larger trucks. And so sometimes providing priority to transit, or even some of the different access to transit improvements, thinking about bike facilities, as well. There's a few more limitations based on what we can do because we have those large trucks that are accommodated. Thanks, Stephen.
Mayor Lou.
For the record, I actually think Mayor Beatty had her hand up before me.
All right, Mayor Beatty.
He's just trying to get me back for all the voting I made him do earlier in the meeting. I have a couple kind of more statements and then a question, I suppose. I think what I find challenging about this and who you mentioned you're meeting with is I think we have two competing interests here, right? Our desire for equity and then our desire for climate and reducing people off the road. And sometimes those two things don't go hand in hand. For example, if we're going to visit all the Chamber of Commerce and the Washington Economic Alliance, that is centering business in the middle of this conversation. And so I don't have a great answer, right? But I know my sister works at Elmer's. She's been at the Beaverton location for 10 years. She's one of the managers there. She commutes in from Banks. Not one of these would serve her to get from her job. And when I think about the people that need our transit the most in my community, it's people that have often been pushed far beyond our borders to live. Now, if we're centering equity, who we would go and talk to in that conversation is going to look very different. But I'm also struck with getting cars off the road is really great. And if we can get cars off the road, then other people could go. I'm just saying this is if we apply an equity lens to the work that we're doing, it's going to be in direct conflict with the outcome we hope for. I don't have a great answer for you. I just find that challenging in my own brain when I'm wrestling through this. And my second comment as the recipient of the West Line, or victim, I'm not sure entirely what word to use with West as it intersects in our community here, but I'm confused on how it fits into this plan.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Maybe just a couple of, I appreciate the feedback first, and maybe just a couple of answers. Yeah, Wes, maybe to start with the second point. Wes is part of this plan. It is a little bit different because it is commuter rail, so it's operating really at major commute times in the morning and evening. So we've included the corridor because we're looking, it's kind of confusing too, because we're looking at different solutions at the high capacity transit level for the corridor. And we're still seeing the Beaverton to Wilsonville corridor as having that strong travel demand, and really that the West isn't quite serving the demand fully. So there's a couple of different ways that we could approach a solution. You know, one would be maybe increasing the frequency on West. Another option would be maybe a complementary investment. It could be making the 76 rapid bus. It could be maybe something like light rail. So, and we don't want to define that at this level of the process, but trying to look at those major travel draws and definitely seeing the corridor still needing some sort of additional solution and recognizing that as part of this plan. West could be one way that we, improving West might be one way we do that, or there are other types of solutions we could look at through corridor planning. And I really appreciate the comments about equity and environment. We definitely, based on the RTP investment priorities, really strongly want to look at both. And I think we are really excited. We've done some work with TriMet's Equity Advisor Committee and through the community-based organization contracts we have with the RTP already to kind of talk about corridors. In the tabling events, we actually put up the broad list of all of the frequent transit connections as part of that work. And we were really excited to see, in addition to TV Highway that's already underway, 185th in particular was one that popped up as of great interest to the community. We did hear about the Beaverton to Wilsonville sort of west adjacent or in vicinity of West corridor. And then also definitely some feedback of the sort of end of the Southwest corridor of the Tiger to Sherwood connection as well, that we're coming out really strongly as part of some of those events. We'll be doing additional work as well in the next couple months with a variety of community-based organizations too. So I hope to have more information on that soon.
All right, my last comment about West, and this is probably more for TriMet versus us, but you know, again, it's that equity versus economic. Like, what are we trying to solve in that corridor? To me, is it an equity issue or is it an economic issue of moving people from housing? And it's okay that all things aren't all things. Where west with us, like our employment areas don't have a west stop. It ends at an area that is not surrounded by business at all. And so if the plan includes potentially looking at additional stops, I mean, our West 5, which is our employment zone, it is over a mile walk from the Beaverton Transit Center to our employment zone. Therefore, West would be like not used at all. And then is there ever a point in which we've made an investment where it's clearly not working that we look to reverse it? Because I do believe this would be a really great regional bike trail if we can't figure it out on how to use it this effectively. And so my hope would be, as the mayor, where it ends, like we have hard conversations about the ridership is not great. Are we going to invest to try to make it work? Or do we pivot and use it for something else? Because there's a lot of people that have electric bikes that probably would, if there was a safe way to commute, would use it that way. And we might actually see more ridership out of that.
Thank you. Mayor Lou.
Thank you. My comments are probably some more statements related to the map that was up for Mayor Shirato. You know, sort of west and south of Tigard, it really looks like a high capacity transit corridor dead zone. And that's an area that's really expanding and exploding with a lot of housing and a lot of growth. And those are the people who really, if they're trying to get places, that high capacity transit that would be there is what they would prefer to use in order to get to downtown quickly. That would motivate me to get out of my car. And I live in this dead zone. And so also to really focus on the importance of having high capacity, more reliable, more frequent transit along the entire Pacific Highway corridor would, to Mayor Beatty's point, really get people out of their cars and allow people to move quickly. And so I just want to acknowledge that, you know, that area could be served. And I hear from people all the time that they wish that there was a way to get around quickly, and it's just a desert out here. And so really looking at east to west as well, getting people from their homes to the Pacific Highway corridor and then moving them quickly once they are on the highway around is really something I hear quite often.
Mayor Callaway.
Thank you, Chair. Ali, thank you for coming back. And so I'm just going to kind of dovetail or extend a little bit on Mayor Loob's comment, because you know, that Highway 99 corridor, I think, used to be a higher tier, and now it's down to 4. And when you think of it going through King City and then on into, you know, Sherwood, but also, you know, being part of the commute shed from like Newburgh and Dundee, it seems that it to be a tier 4, it in my mind, it just doesn't quite make a lot of sense. And it makes me wonder, you know, you mentioned the evolving definition. And so, and I hadn't thought of it until the presentation, but as the definition evolves, does that create a moving target? So, you know, cities, or, you know, as we plan, you know, that's why you have tier 2s that all of a sudden end up as tier 4s, or like in Hillsborough's case, you know, something that disappears from the list altogether. And if so, you know, how is the evolution of the term determined? Because maybe I want to kind of lobby, you know, for some of that evolving definition, if that makes sense. So, so I guess that's basically my you know, kind of question, 2 questions kind of wrapped up in a comment. You know, the Pacific Highway being down to level 4 in spite of the commute shed, and then you know, the HTC that was in Amber Glen, you know, is now nowhere, you know, on the plan at all.
Thank you, Mayor. As far as the evolving target, maybe I'll speak to that first. It is definitely something that we do want to relook at our high capacity transit approach and policy framework every so often. So we did the 2009 plan, but in 2018, and actually it's part of the there was an RTP in 2014 and also 2010. We do some work to look at changing conditions, because we do know that we're seeing differences, and especially, gosh, since the pandemic, we're seeing differences in travel patterns and differences in where growth is happening. So it is something that we continually refresh. And I think similar to 99, the other thing that we're looking at is, yeah, where has that changed, and how does it maybe affect how we were thinking back in 2009 or where we thought growth might be happening, where we're actually seeing it now that we have, more than 10 years of data to kind of to bolster that. And it'll probably in the next 10 years, we'll have a little bit better idea of new data as well, especially as things, the future, things like the pandemic kind of change things in ways we never thought coming. And then as far as the kind of the broader, I think we're a lot of the questions too about the broader spectrum and network of transit too. There are definitely ways that we need to fill some gaps as far as getting to the high capacity system, which I'm definitely hearing in a number of the feedback. And that is something that we're still looking to do as well. So as we're looking to grow transit, fill the gaps where there isn't transit today, either through thinking about, Forward Together has been working on bus service, there's shuttles as well. So planning for that and really diving deeper into those as part of the access to transit strategy. And then thinking about growing into more frequent transit and then HCT. Those are all elements of the strategy. And so it's just, I think that the tool that we use in some cases today, the better tool might be something like a shuttle or a bus to connect to the high capacity transit system. And then over time, we're growing all of that together. And then the last point was the Amber Glen streetcar. That is something that we do need to reflect on the map. I appreciate you bringing that up. We have been discussing, one of the last places we left off with the working group was how we address streetcar as part of this strategy. Because in a lot of cases, streetcar today is an important complementary role. It's providing some of those connections to the broader system within centers, but we are seeing there are opportunities to grow that over time through rapid streetcar or other types of solutions where we can actually, like the Amber Glen Tannisbourne to Orenco streetcar is going to be providing additional connections as well. So I'll follow up with staff on that.
Very good, thank you. And I love, obviously the 185th is a high tier corridor. Just want to make sure that there's that max crossing, the overcrossing there at baseline of 185th as part of that. Thanks.
Jeff.
Oh, so much fun, so many opportunities. I think we need to get out of our own way on this because we're really thinking small ball instead of really thinking outside the box and getting a real high capacity transit system going. And when I say that, I'm in agreement with the folks that are talking about 99W and reaching out. We don't serve our urban centers. Newburgh, Canby, they have ginormously grown. And if you want to get more cars off the road and get more people onto a high capacity transit system, we have to really look outside the metro boundary and actually serve the area around us. I think the best example I pulled up, and it's an easy one for me to use, my brother-in-law's commute from Puyallup to Seattle. He gets on the train in the morning. It takes 49 minutes to get to downtown Seattle by train. If he drove, it'd be 41 minutes. It's only 8 minutes longer to go by train. That's the kind of competition we need to be looking for. That's the kind of service we need to be able to provide to get people out of cars. My 17-minute commute taking an hour on the bus to get from Cornelius to Hillsborough is not game changing. Nobody's getting out of their car for that, right? We need to be able to do something like connect our centers, a Forest Grove to Cornelius to Hillsborough to Beaverton to Tigard to Tualatin to Wilsonville in a timely and expedient fashion. That's a high capacity transit center I could get behind, right? If we can't bring the people in, the number of people that work in downtown Hillsborough, the biggest employment center in the state, are coming from Yamhill, Canby, Newburgh, Vancouver, East County. we don't have a real high capacity transit that gets anywhere. We've got a bus, and I'm just going to say it, peduncles along every few blocks and stops and picks a few people up, and people are so time abused that they get off before you can get 5 miles. That's why our ridership is so, we need to break out of this. We need to look at the next paradigm. So that's where I'm really looking to challenge. I mean, if that means we got to look at that, I don't know why we're not doing 99, right? It just seems ridiculous that we're not looking at these kind of places to reach out, because that would be a game changer. Imagine if you got somewhere coming out of that area, right? If you could actually serve Canby, come through Wilsonville or employment centers, because people are already driving that. That's why you can't get through I-5 in the evening, is they're coming into Tiger 12 and Wilsonville to work, or Hillsborough. So I think we need to get out of our own way and really look at some high capacity centers. I mean, imagine if the train really used the track that's already there to get from McMinnville up through Forest Grove into Beaverton. Oh, the track's already there. It goes to Stimson Lumber now. So I'm sorry. I just feel like we're looking at making this kind of improvement when we should be looking at this kind of improvement to exactly what Lacey was saying, right? I mean, if people can do the short commute, if they're willing to change over to something like a bike or something else, that's great. But we need some game changing additions to our system. Thank you.
Tim.
Thank you. And Allie, thanks for coming again and presenting to us. I really appreciate the time and effort you guys put into these presentations and the quality. I just want to say thank you to my colleagues in Western Washington County for bringing up 99 West and the challenges that we have on that. I think in a previous meeting, we talked about, you don't need incremental change, we need revolutionary change. I completely agree with Jeff's sentiment on that. I won't hit on all those buttons again, but the traffic coming out of Dundee, Newburgh, Yamhill County, up through 99 West, it's a problem on many levels. And if we don't give people an option that makes sense for them in their daily busy lives, they're not going to take it. So we need to think differently about this. And I really appreciate Mayor Beatty's comment about rethinking things that are established, and I know the West Side Rail is one that maybe needs to be rethought. But, I look at bus service in Sherwood, and we've seen ridership decline. We see frequent buses coming through. I have one constituent who likes to send me emails with a daily count of empty buses that go by their house, because they have to listen to it every day. So I think if the ridership is low, and I'm speaking mostly of Sherwood here, we need to think about why it's low there, and how do we correct that, and how do we get people choosing different transportation options. And I think this is incredibly important, not just for all the factors that we're facing today in terms of where traffic's coming from, but also what the state is asking us to do with HB 2001 and CFAC. We're being challenged to make our communities more transit friendly. And when you don't have effective transit in your community, it doesn't work. We're being asked to, not have minimum parking requirements for commercial developments, et cetera. So I think we need to think differently about this, and we need to do it quickly. I wanted to mention one thing. I don't think you mentioned you're going to have some table meetings and some forums out there. I don't think we've had one in Sherwood. I can get you a building and a place to have the meeting if you guys would consider having one out here to make sure our constituents out here are being heard as we move forward. And I know there weren't any questions in there. I think everyone else asked all the questions that I had as I was writing them down. In fact, again, thank you for everyone in this group, because I was just checking things off my list as everyone else is talking. So I appreciate everyone in this meeting. And again, thank you, Allie. Appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner Fye.
Thank you, Chair Bubenik, and congratulations on being a chair for WCCC. And you're looking forward to your chairship this year. Ali, thank you for your presentation. I have a quick comment, and I think I have perhaps one refinement and one question. My comment is, I really appreciate the corridor definitions. I really felt like it was pretty holistic and comprehensive. I think many of us around the transportation circles have those conversations with ODOT to try to fight the definition of a corridor. And I really appreciate what Metro did around defining corridor. But I will say one of the limitations on the other end was the readiness and the criteria that qualifies a corridor ready. And I think it might have ruled out some corridors that I personally consider fit in your definition of a corridor, but didn't quite meet the readiness criteria. And one of those that come to mind is I appreciate the recognition on the northwest side of Highway 10 or Farmington, but the southwest side of it is missing. And I think that area is projected high growth and does connect to the centers. And I think the ridership perhaps slowed down due to pandemic, but it is there because I do live on that side of that orphan highway. But my question is, one of the slides around the potential projects, there were circles that were bubbled, and I didn't quite get what the fully bubbled versus no bubbled or half bubbled, what they were. And that particular slide is potential project and representative corridor. Could you just quickly speak on that so that if any constituents of us reach out, we're better able to explain what the and what the the evaluation piece, I get it. You don't need to go to details, but just quickly the bubble piece of it. And then the other refinements, I'll just brain dump on you, Allie, because I think you've been doing a great job of holding all these comments and questions and answering. The refinement is, many, I come from a transit rider and riding the bus, and many of us that ride the bus associate corridors with a bus line. So I think if you could include an addendum of what are these bus lines that are going to be impacted would be really greatly appreciated. That way constituents can hold the conversations around, okay, so these are the bus lines that are impacted when we're talking about these corridors, and then plan our trips accordingly too. So I think those are my question and a refinement and comments. Other than that, I think you're on the right track of gathering all the informations you need for this. And I will say, Mayor Delane, I really appreciate last year you did comment around maybe we should offer electric vehicles to everyone if we really want to address the climate. And I love that comment. And I was like, talk about socialism. No, I'm just and then today you really hit it on the nail. So I really hope Metro heard what Mayor Delane said around, how do we connect and how we think about it. I just wanted to say, I heard you and I appreciated hearing that. So, Allie.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I really appreciate the suggestion for refinement. We actually did hear the same suggestion, and we should definitely be adding that. One of the things we ran into was that some of the lines don't have a bus line associated with them, or might have multiples. So, but it would definitely be much more helpful. We also do that with engagement when we're talking with people at tabling events. We are referring to the bus line where possible. So I really appreciate that. And the slide with the bubbles. So that was a way we used sort of the consumer reports. And I know I'm dating myself here, or I think they're called the Harvey balls, that method of showing differences between how, when we applied the different types of criteria I mentioned, which ones were, it's on basically a kind of a pie scale, from a full circle, a 3/4, half, quarter, or not filled circle, to represent some of the differences in scoring, as far as we did 3 major areas, kind of those core criteria, which are a little bit more quantitative and tied a little bit more closely to the federal criteria. The readiness, where it's a little bit more qualitative and looking at other less numerical measures, and then a total as well. So that's what that slide was representing in some different colors to show them. Because in some cases, there is some differentiation within the tiers of things that are showing more readiness. And sometimes it's a fact, it might be that we're maybe seeing some elements of readiness in one category and not the other. And that's where you're seeing a lot of where you're getting into the tier 3 corridors that starts to show up. So that's basically what all of those little indicators mean. So appreciate the question.
Councilor Rosenthal.
I defer to Tara and Mayor Shirato before I make my comments, since I can always go in-house.
All right, Tara.
Tara, we're not hearing you. I think I just heard an echo. Maybe that.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Come back to me. I'll figure it out.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Sorry.
You're good.
All right. We can hear you, Tara.
Now you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Taking off the headset. Okay, we're good? Yes. So I wanted to go back to some of the comments you all said as Ali was just talking about, and to Commissioner Fry's comment. There were several different criteria that the working group and project management team looked at to get to these tiers. And one thing that I think would be helpful is, I know Ali had reviewed with staff kind of how what led to the scoring or lower scoring on certain corridors and some possible next steps, because perhaps some corridors, and I can't remember Highway 99 off the top of my head, but didn't have zoning that supported that was transit supportive in certain areas. And so the tiering in terms of what score ended up higher on the list is really based on how well a corridor would likely score for federal funding. And so I think we've been talking about kind of some tips on what local jurisdictions or the county or partners can do to make corridors more ready for increased transit investment. Because part of what led corridors to be higher on the list is the likelihood that it would be a strong FTA, small starts or new starts application. And that is really the federal criteria that shows, okay, the land use is supportive, there's destinations, there's lots of jobs, there's density. And so I know we got really into the details on that. And so I think that's maybe a next step to share with this group and others in terms of what are some of the things that local partners can do to improve transit readiness in certain corridors. And second, in terms of getting to a game-changing high-capacity transit system, as we're talking about, we need game-changing levels of investment, and we are not there. As you know, the regional funding measure a few years ago to provide some of that and some of the seed funding for a lot of these corridors to either start planning or start more investment did not pass. And so these are not just TriMet and Metro projects or corridor projects that we would want to see a strong level of support and partner funding commitment from each of you. And so the level of prioritization on this list is only as strong as the level of support from partners around this table, because something being in tier 2 doesn't mean much if there's not an interest from the partners around this table in putting time and money into making that the next BRT project. So I just wanted to put that out there. And Mayor Beatty, that's also part of why we had suggested some additional business outreach as well, because I think Metro's been doing a lot of outreach to the public, but as we're looking at kind of prioritizing and looking at the next tier of corridors, in addition to the ones that we're still very much trying to figure out how to fund, it seemed like there was more conversations with businesses that needed to be happening to start running some of these corridor tiers by different business groups, in addition to the outreach happening with RDP.
I want to be clear that I'm not, sorry, critiquing going to businesses. It's just a point of sometimes we know what we want to accomplish. We want to get people off the road and going to business. But instead of saying that, we're saying all these other things and then yelling equity in the middle of it and then trying to shove all these additional things in there. So I think some clarity on what we're trying to accomplish. Not that I'm upset we're going to business groups. I'm just saying it's a conflicting message. And if you tell me you want to try to get to people off the road and into businesses, it totally makes sense to go there. I just think what we say matters, and we can't just throw equity in as an afterthought or think we're checking the box.
Maybe to add on a little bit to what Tara was saying, thank you, Tara. Just a couple of pieces, and as an example, just thinking about the, Tara mentioned the federal criteria. We have our hands tied a little bit when thinking about what's more ready. The federal criteria right now, we all as regional partners are really interested in future connections and supporting the 2040 growth concept. And we're definitely on agreement on that. The federal criteria focuses much more on current ridership today. So it's one of those things where even though we're balancing both and we want to be both thinking about what's going to be most eligible and competitive for federal funding to implement the vision, while also keeping an eye on these future connections, we sometimes have our hands tied a little bit because the federal criteria does have some particular things it looks at, like current rather than future ridership. And that's another reason why we know definitely that we're going to be seeing growth throughout the region in a lot of these places. But that's another reason that we do end up seeing the tiering look like what it does. So that's what Tara's mentioning when she's saying the federal criteria and some of the limitations that we're coming up against. And then just to expand a little bit on the readiness, yeah, we definitely wanted to look at similar. We've been talking about the CFEC, the climate friendly, equitable communities, because especially with Rapid Bus, which we're considering now, Rapid Bus is really a partnership. Because we are using the roadway and we are looking, there's the features that TriMet provides, like the articulated buses and some of the station elements. There's definitely key features that aren't in TriMet's wheelhouse, which are things or jurisdiction, like the space in the roadway to be providing that transit priority to make sure it's getting that speed and reliability, whether that's a bus lane, working together for the transit signal priority. There's things the buses can do, but have to have this, work with the signals to do. And then there's access to the stations and corridor as well. And so thinking about making sure that there people that are walking and rolling can get to the corridor. And so some of those less quantitative measures that we looked at are bringing all of that into account. In some cases, we have some more work to do as far as policies that would really help support us get there. Some cases too, it's the policies might be in place, but we're waiting for those through things like the market to show up. So there's definitely some things that we're looking to do together to really be supporting all of the corridors, and that you're seeing in the tiering results as well, really in line with that policy framework.
And I would just build on that quickly. Can you guys hear me? Okay, now I can hear you and you can hear me. Great. That corridors that are not on that map that you just looked at could very well still be better bus, also known as ETC, enhanced transit corridors, or some of those corridors that are on the longer term list that are tier 4 or further out. Those could be very good candidates for where we would make some of those transit priority investments to speed up existing buses on those roadways. And so though it might not be a light rail or bus rapid transit corridor in the near term, there are still investments we could be making to really speed up transit that is not a federally funded high capacity transit project. And so you'll definitely be hearing from us in Metro soon about the next phases of that process for better bus programs specifically, and that just because a corridor isn't on this draft list for HCT vision at this point or is later down the list doesn't mean that it's not ripe for additional investment to speed up transit to make it a more competitive option. So I just wanted to make sure to put that out there as well.
All right. because we're running a bit behind, so I got to move this along. So I'm going to go with Mayor Shirato, then Mayor Rosner, then Councilor Rosenthal, please.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate the situation that you're sitting in. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as a history pill. If there were, I would like to dispense it amongst all of the elected officials attending today. These corridor questions have been on the radar for over a decade. The Southwest Corridor, for example, has been, if you will, gone all the way from concept to the voters. And recently, or relatively recently, was not accepted by the voters. The Southwest Corridor would have addressed many, many, many of the issues that we're presently discussing. And having been a member of the original TriMet board on the Southwest Corridor, and then as it evolved to the Metro side, also on that board, again, I wish I could share information with you all about what was collected, what was done, what was dispersed, how we got to the point that we did of bringing it to the public for a vote, including having lined up congressional delegations. At that time, Representative DeFazio was a very powerful person in Congress with regard to transportation funding. We had Senators Wyden and Merkley involved in the Southwest Corridor. And then also on the 99W. The 99W project has been high profile with the mayors in the communities that have affected it relatively. Most of, a lot of those mayors are now new. So again, there's history involved here, which we can't share immediately. But one of the biggest things that we ran into with Highway 99 is the city of Portland and Peabody. The fact of the matter is that Highway 99 is, it's not high transit capacity capable. It was not, the infrastructure was not built in there. All the area around Fred Meyer on what we call Barber Boulevard is all substandard for high capacity. And we'd have to go back in and do infrastructure. It's not just a matter of building the roadways for buses, for example. And it's something that Mayor Lowe brought up. When we look at that map, all of those maps, the southwest portion of Washington County and the the southeast portion of Washington County and the southwest portion of Clackamas County is the only area in the metropolitan area that's not served by TriMet. By MAX. We have no light rail out here. And that was supposedly going to be addressed by the Southwest Corridor. So what I'm trying to say is that let's not try to reinvent the wheel. There's been a lot of work that's been done over more than 10 years to try to bring high capacity transportation out to this portion of the metropolitan area. And a lot of the cast of characters have changed all the way from the hierarchies in Metro to the hierarchies in TriMet. But there is a lot of work that has been done trying to achieve exactly what we're talking about. Having said that, I'm going to defer back to you, Chair, because I know we are running late in time, and as I said, I could go on the history on this for quite a while, and I'm not going to. Spare you all.
All right. Where'd Tim move to? Where'd you go?
Oh, I'm going to bow out in interest of time. So
all right.
I'm good.
All right. Councilor Rosenthal.
Just a quick comment. I appreciate the presentation that Ali made. It's a very complex process. I'm hoping that we can get a little bit more, dig into details on each of the individual corridors. I want to support Mayor Shirato. I'm quite committed to pushing forward on the Southwest Corridor because I think that's a tier 1 and I think it needs to be moved forward. I agree with basically I agree with everything that the mayor said, all of you, basically, in particular, the comments that we need to think larger rather than incrementally. We're going to be limited by funding in the long term. That's true, but we need to think of what the future is going to bring. I have a bunch of other concerns, but I will probably address those either with individual jurisdictions and also with staff, because I can always set up meetings to talk to Ali easily. So I will do that, and rather than take up any more time right now. But I think West is something that deserves a lot of issue. Highway 99 deserves a lot of concern. The whole added population that we're putting out on the far west side deserves a lot of concern. And the Southwest Corridor deserves a lot of effort. So those are the things that I'm really going to be focusing on.
Hands back up, Tim.
I'm sorry, I'm just a couple seconds here, and I thank you, Garrett, and I think this was said, but I just want to say it again. I remind staff at the city all the time that we need to be grant ready. You know, we never know what funding opportunities are going to pop up, and you know, so making sure that we have the focus, the planning done, for the projects that we need to do in these corridors, to make things work, so we're ready when the funding opportunities arise, because it may not be funding opportunities that we know about today. And I know we've seen a lot of that in the last 3 years, where new opportunities have popped up, and if you were ready, you got it. If you weren't ready, you didn't get it.
Yep. All right, I just got two quick things. Everyone else covered what I want to talk about. As for Ali, as far as Tim's request about come out to Sherwood, did you come out to Tualatin at all and talk to the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce?
We actually haven't done those focus groups yet. We may not have the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce on our list, so I appreciate that.
Please,
feedback.
we have a significant manufacturing industrial base out here with people who can't get to and from to their workplaces. So if you could put that on the list, please. And going back to what they always told me about the significant, payroll tax that our employers pay for TriMet, and so they want to be listened to. And second thing, real quick, any impact on how these tiers work if tolling is brought on board? Because obviously the east-west connection between Tualatin and Oregon City would increase that from a tier 3 to me to a tier 1 in order to deal with the tolling. Getting people an alternative to tolling.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will mention too regarding the first, we are going to the West Side Economic Alliance, which does have some representation, but then we can definitely add on. So I appreciate that. Just wanted to make sure I said that. And then tolling is a great question. Right now ODOT is actually, I'm not sure how much they've been talking about it yet, but there's a process that's going on with stakeholders, so partner jurisdictions that we're participating in, TriMet's participating in.
Yep.
Yeah, the public transportation strategy. Yep. So we were hoping that those two processes would align for this RTP update so that we could be folding that work in. Unfortunately, the public transportation strategy timeline is a little bit longer and will be an amendment to the RTP. So we're looking forward to basically having those two things be intertwined, but it's just not within the same time frame for the RTP update.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ali, for coming today and taking the time to answer all these questions.
Chair Bubenik, I have one comment, if I may.
Right, Commissioner.
Ali, I'd like to put on my advocacy hat on virtually and see if there is an opportunity for Metro, for refinement, for Metro to connect. And I think this goes to Councilor Rosenthal as well, to connect with Mayor Schroeder and the comments and the suggestions that he was making. So I just wanted to advocate for that and see if there's a opportunity to connect before we move forward from this conversation.
Absolutely. Commissioner, do you mean offline or in the meeting?
I don't know. I think Mayor Schroeder had really concrete suggestions, and I think there's a lot of historical knowledge that could be passed. I'm sure you know, but I think it'd be worth to have a conversation to figure out how do we incorporate some of the suggestions.
ASAP.
Okay, so it sounds like an offline meeting, please.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, with that, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on to the next item, which is our state legislative session preview. I know Erin Doyle can speak quickly, and she's gonna have to.
Thank you, Chair Bubenik. For those of you who don't know me, I am Erin Doyle. I'm the Senior Government Relations Manager for Washington County. I have been in and around local government lobbying for quite some time. I will talk fast, but you made me. So as many of you might know, the odd years are long sessions in which the Oregon State Legislature sets the biennial budget for the state of Oregon. And so that means it is a very long session that is scheduled to start on the 17th of January. They were officially sworn in this morning. Apparently there was some excitement on the floor as there was a lion dance on the House floor as everyone got sworn in. But I missed that. So we are starting the session with a lot of changes. We have a new governor. We have a brand new Senate president, which is the first time that's happened in, I think, 20 years, something. I don't know. It's been a long time, and not 20 years, 10 years, with Senator Rob Wagner, who represents part of Washington County. In addition, we have a new Senate Majority Leader in Senator Lieber, who represents a large chunk of Washington County, and the respective cities that they sit on top of, which is what I was doing over here while you guys were talking transit, figuring out where they actually sit. On the House side, it's the same House leadership coming out of House Speaker comes out of Corvallis. I'm sorry, I'm also getting over a cold, so every once in a while my voice is like, I'm gonna disappear for a second. And then the House Majority Leader coming out of Eugene. On the minority leadership side, we have Senator Tim Knopp out of Bend. And on the House side, that name has escaped me, but also not from the metro region. So on the Senate side, we have a lot of representation from Washington County in leadership, which is exciting, which means we can really exercise our voice coordinatedly as a county, and the cities and the constituencies that we jointly represent, and getting some things moved forward. But they're already working really hard. As of this weekend, over 1,800 bills were dropped as pre-session filed, and I am about 500 bills in, and I've just seen a lot of ideas, and it's super exciting. No, it's not. So between that pile of bills that we're going to have to sort through and figure out what's moving forward, and the budget, this is going to be a very intense and long session, as per every odd year. I'm going to focus now a little bit into what I expect coming out of in the land use world and in the transportation world. And then I'll talk a little bit about Washington County's priorities as adopted by our county commission, and then turn it back over to you guys to have your conversation about what other things you're interested in hearing about and what other priorities each of you have as you approach the legislative session. In the land use world, there's two big areas that I foresee a lot of work continuing to happen. One is in housing and homelessness. I think that everyone can agree that there has not been a solution found that has cured our state's problem from having sufficient levels of housing to house not only market rate purchasers and or renters, as well as those that are at the either the cusp of becoming homeless or are in fact homeless right now. However, some of the solutions I don't know are long-term beneficial to local governments. They're looking at things like modifying our system development charges, which are how we pay for infrastructure, which is actually kind of necessary because as exciting as it is to own a home without a toilet is really hard to sell or live in and might not be considered meeting building codes. And the sewer needs to have capacity to flow. Things like that. Another bill I suspect will come back is the one related to substantial completion, which is really about how we time out construction permits through the land use and infrastructure development process for subdivisions. That has supposed to have been negotiated over the course of the interim. We have not been reached out to as local governments to be part of that conversation. So I have no idea if they've modified based on anything that we've explained what needs to happen on a property before we can really be ready to issue construction permits. And then all in all, there has been a recognition that capacity across the board for staff to do the work, for workforce to do the work, for everyone who is part of that process of building out from, I have a piece of land I'd like to develop, can I get permission, all the way through final construction to move in ready. There are portions of that that really need more capacity built into it, be that fiscal capacity where we need more revenues coming out of the state for purposes of infrastructure, to workforce capacity, both in the trades and internal to local government through permitting staff, building officials, and inspectors. All of those things have been recognized, and the state acknowledged about 450 staff shortages within local government's processes alone that really hold up the system, and trying to figure out systems for how we can pay for those new employees, but also make sure that they're trained up and workforce ready, because there is some specialization that happens within those, permit counters, building inspectors, all of those things, which needs investment and encouragement for people to join that workforce. I think the other piece of it that's coming forward is whether or not CFEC needs some amendment. There's been some legislative conversation around that. I know that there is some litigation that's ongoing. I think everyone agrees that the outcomes are agreed upon. The methodology is where the questions lie, and the process to adopt that methodology felt raw to many folks. So that conversation is likely to keep going when it comes to housing production strategies and what that means within the metro region and the level of coordination it's going to take between the 3 levels of government of metro, counties, and cities. All of that is also up for consideration, as has been put out in the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis report that was presented by jointly from DLCD and the Oregon Housing and Community Services departments to the state legislature. And there is ongoing work on a legislative concept related to the recommendations specific to the metro region. There's a lot of questions about who should be on first for the finalization of how we develop and plan for urban levels of housing within all of the cities and the urban unincorporated areas of Washington County within the metro region. And then those folks who are not in the metro region, how legislative changes might impact your capacities to do the work that is required under the new housing production strategies. So that was a lot really fast. The other big area in land use is of course going to be around industrial lands. And there are a lot of big questions that are being left open by the semiconductor task force work about having site development ready sites across the state, but also specifically in the metro region related to semiconductor production. That question has no answer currently, but that is going to be a huge conversation, both within the beginning of session as we try to figure out what we can do to make ourselves CHIPS Act funding ready, but also long-term conversation around how we can look at the land use system without completely tearing it apart for purposes of industrial use that can not just meet the semiconductor industry, but all advanced manufacturing, so we can kind of diversify the statewide impacts of any land use changes related to industrial land. So that's land use in the nuttiest of nutshells. Turning over to transportation, have you all heard that there's a bridge that needs to be built that connects us up to Washington? And there's a lot of things that have to happen in order for that to occur. One of those things is a big legislative push to find approximately $1 billion to get that funded. And that is going to take up a huge amount of the airspace in the conversation around transportation in this session. You all may have heard from your transportation and planning folks that there's also some consideration of how ODOT is going to continue to pay for itself writ large, especially in the operations and maintenance areas of the work. In 2017, when the state legislature passed House Bill 2017, very clever, they did a lot of work towards capital construction and new facilities and enhanced facilities, but they didn't do much to shore up the budget around operations and maintenance for ODOT. And there is now a question as to how ODOT can maintain and operate the facilities that they're in charge of. And one of those pieces of those conversation has come through this state fund exchange, which is a program by which we take federal monies that local governments can have and exchange it with the state for a small fee, and then make sure our programs can function, or we have sufficient funding to do our operations, maintenance, and other programs that we use that funding for. So right now, the League of Oregon Cities, the Association of Oregon Counties, and ODOT are having an ongoing conversation about how we solidify that need for that exchange program to continue, while also making sure that ODOT is capable of being a partner in the operations and maintenance world in which all of our facilities do connect to one another. And if we do not have sufficient resources across the board, that is going to be a major problem. Because even if everybody magically had access to high capacity transit, they still probably would be on buses that need to be on roads. And if the roads are giant potholes, it's not going to be a great ride regardless. So all of these issues are big questions. And the question is how much tolerance for revenue changes and or revenue raising is going to occur in the state legislative session when they are going to have to look for some mechanism to pay for the Oregon portion of the interstate bridge replacement. And that funding needs to be shored up so that we can qualify for the major grants that are available through the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, which was a massive boon for us because we had some really great leadership in the House and Senate that really threw the marker down for that Interstate 5 bridge replacement. And all of that is going to tie back to tolling, which will continue to be a piece of conversation until it's actually enacted. But the intention of ODOT in this session is to only open up the tolling statute so far as is needed to make sure that when we toll the I-5 bridge across the Columbia River, that we can share our revenues with the state of Washington appropriately, since both sides will be tolling. And we can't just hog all the money for the Oregon share. Apparently that's not fair. So that's kind of the big picture on transportation. I think there are a lot of other projects that we should, be looking at individually for, potential funding. I don't think that there's going to be a funding package like a Connect package in the 2023 because of the size of the interstate bridge price tag. But preparing for another robust package is, I think, a great way to step forward. The other piece of that is looking at some of those, I don't think we call them orphan highways anymore, but basically those state-run facilities that really run as our main streets or connector streets now. They aren't really state highways, and seeing what programmatic changes we can make to ensure there's sufficient funding to make those urban ready for purposes jurisdictional transfer, or just making them urban ready so that they remain connected when they move from city to city without changing ownership. All of those questions I think are also on the board. So something we've named Great Streets, which is really that jurisdictional transfer, urban levels of state highway facilities, is also on the table for this session. Turning quickly to the Washington County agenda, there are 5 things that our board has prioritized, and they adopted their agenda in early December. The first 2 really go to the capacity for the county to continue to do the work that's required of us. So one is ensuring that if the state is going to mandate things, or if the state has already mandated things, that they come up with the revenues to pay for those, so that we can continue to make sure that our local revenues can go to the rest of the programs that aren't required, or that are required but have no other funding source attributed to them. To move forward, the second goes to the capacity of our workforce and making sure that there are investments at the state level in local government workforce, so that way we can find the people to do the work that we need. Much of that's concentrated in the behavioral health and public health spaces, but it is not limited to that. I think it would very easily include the need to make sure that our planning departments can handle the amount of expected growth in permitting for housing if investments go well from the state. The third is related to SIP and gain share, and making sure that those revenue streams and revenue sources for economic development pay us back when we make local investments of property taxes into those programs, making sure that the resources come back to us so that we continue to pay for the rest of the programming that we need to accomplish to build livable communities. And that those things need to be updated to reflect what it actually costs to do things in 2023. And the final 2 things are capital projects that Washington County really needs the state to step in and help us with. First is creating planning dollars for the courthouse. For those of you who have any public safety folks that end up in our courthouses, our current courthouse is really insufficient, and we need to start planning for replacement of that building. And we need the state to put up their half for that replacement project. And then the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment, we are looking to close the gap for our final funding, which is a major boon to creating the behavioral health and public health services that really can help address some fundamental issues for members of our community, and have a tiered structure in which they have a safe place to receive the treatment that they need to help them out of addiction and back into stable housing, long-term success without the addiction coming with them. So with all of that, I think I went fast. I think I covered most of the things I meant to cover, and I welcome any questions and happy to turn it back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Erin. Great job on ripping through that. We've only got 2 minutes left, so we're only going to take a handful of questions, and then we have to move on to our next 2 items. Mayor Callaway.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. Erin, thank you very much. And I read through, all of the materials really carefully, because one of the things that, Chair Harrington has talked about is forced annexation by the cities of unincorporated Washington County. And when Mayor Beatty, Mayor Lenahan, Commissioner Fye, and others met with Governor Kotek's transition team, Chair Harrington, in response to the question, how can the governor's office partner, with us? She said, mandated annexation to get the county out of the city service game. So I am concerned or cautious, whatever the right word is, if this is, language or, a desire expressed with mayors as well as with the governor's office. I have poured through, the legislative agenda, and I'm not sure if I don't believe it's even sneaky written in here, but is this something, mandating annexation, forced annexation by Washington County cities into unincorporated Washington County? Is that anywhere stated or implied in your legislative priorities? Is it going to be, or is this, so I guess I just need to know what are the legs to those comments that we continue to hear from the county commission?
It is not written into our agenda in either a priority or principle that we have established as a 5-member board. I think what the board has been focusing on is making sure that we are providing the essential county services, and we aren't trying to be both a city and a county on a county budget. And that conversation varies from commissioner to commissioner, and they haven't come to a consensus on how they want to word or enact any sort of legislative assistance related to that. I think that that's a longer term conversation that needs to be had at a policy level that is not mine to have.
Sure. Well, I yes, you're right. It is at a higher level, but I just thought if you were reporting on, legislative priorities, that this, it was good. It would be good to know. And so thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Beatty.
I was going to say, may I add, Chair? Sorry.
Go ahead. We've got 2 more items left in 7 minutes.
I was just going to comment to curb some anxieties or about this topic. We haven't had, Erin is correct, we haven't had Mayor Callaway as a board the conversation about forced annexation. So that hasn't come up, and it's not on our board initiatives as well. So I don't know when that will come, but I agree with Erin. It's a higher conversation, long-term conversation that isn't going to be, so just.
Okay. Mayor Beatty.
So similar on that vein, I won't beat a dead horse, but I prefer the term abandoned state highways, although Gwen kicks me under the table every time I say it. Orphaned highways suggest someone's coming along to save them. So I think similarly in this conversation about annexation, I think Mayor Callaway and I agree, like cities are the best people to do city work. But similarly to where we would not take a highway that doesn't meet our standards, taking unincorporated areas that don't meet city standards is very worrisome. Beaverton is in probably the worst financial situation we've been in that we've uncovered in a long time. Annexation and providing services that we already don't serve would be highly irregular and not at all achievable right now. But I mean, I think it would be naive for us to not think, as the county is also facing a massive budget shortfall, that annexation isn't on the topic. And so while I appreciate Commissioner Fye's points, I think we all know everything is on the table right now. And our request particularly as the two mayors that are very surrounded by unincorporated Washington County, is that we're brought into the conversation along with our staff. And we know that annexation requires massive legislative fixes. So I'm not surprised to see it in talking points going into a legislative session. But, you know, don't catch us off guard. We're allies in this conversation, not adversaries, but it's important to us that we're being included in these conversations.
I appreciate that. And I'll pass that back on as well as Commissioner Fye. We'll do that as well.
All right, thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us, we got a few minutes left here. JPAC, there's no JPAC agenda yet because we're meeting a week early, but Mike McKillop and Chris wanted to discuss briefly now some carbon reduction funds that are in front of Metro. So I'm going to turn the floor over to the two of them.
I'm already here, so given the shortness of time, I'll just jump in.
Right.
So the big thing on the JPAC agenda you'll be well prepared for is a discussion about the HCT strategy for the Regional Transportation Plan. Metro did receive funds through the infrastructure bill for carbon reduction program, 18.8 million. TPAC started the discussion about policies that could be considered for how those would be allocated, and that discussion will continue at JPAC, and maybe at our next meeting we could talk a little bit more about that. JPAC actually isn't scheduled, I think, until March, so you have a little bit of time. So how's that for our 1 minute overview?
And I don't know if I said Mike McKillop or Mike McCarthy. Both were
Okay.
engineers here at Tualatin.
Mike McCarthy.
So Mike McCarthy.
Mike can add some more color if he's now here.
Yes. Mike, you have anything to add on that?
Thanks. I think Chris covered it well.
All right, cool.
I would say that I think this is going to be worthy of more discussion, because it's not often that we get extra money to spend, and there's 82 million available at this total that came into the state as a whole. So there's some money out there that always makes people want to talk about it.
Right. All right. Thanks, Chris and Mike. And our last item today is our MPAC agenda. What we're going to do is have Councilor Rosenthal give us a heads up on what he foresees will be coming in front of MPAC in the year ahead.
I was sitting on mute, sorry. Well, first of all, we want to thank Mayor Buck for running MPAC for the last year, and welcome Councilor Vince Jones, who's going to be the new chair of MPAC. That's a transition that's happening right at the moment. We're going to coming up. Well, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming up in the next year, and I don't think I can go through all of it in any detail. We're going to continue discussions on high capacity transit strategy as well as urban mobility strategies. There's obviously going to be discussions on tolling and implementation of the tolling programs. I hope there's a discussion on the interaction of the tolling program with the Or2Go program, which is the VMT program that ODOT, that has been covered recently, that ODOT's going to be rolling out. I think because that's going to impact our region more directly. We're going to have a lot of discussions on the garbage and recycling facilities plan, particularly on the, they did a gap analysis, which has not quite come out yet, but it's in process or close to coming out. The gap analysis, what we're going to need, and this is going to affect, of course, Hillsborough, Forest Grove, and Cornelius, particularly because it's going to be a decision. There's going to be a lot of discussion on the decision of what to do with the Cornelius properties that Metro bought 2 years ago. So that's a big deal. It's going to be coming up. Then there's going to be continuing work on the region's housing programs. Particularly, of course, we have the year analysis is going to be coming out shortly, probably within the next week or two. And so there's going to be a lot of updates on that with the implementation of the milestones for the SHS measure, and whether we're getting the appropriate data from all the jurisdictions, whether everybody's up to speed and on board so that we have the data to assess how we're doing. There's going to be goals and metrics that we're going to be evaluating. The quarterly report is coming in March, I believe. And then the urban land use exchange thing is going to be voted on early this year, or late, about 2 weeks from now. That's going to be the exchange between Tigard and some portions of Clackamas County. That's still, the decision is going to be made on that. So those are a couple of the things that are coming up. we'll probably be talking from time to time about our, our legislative agenda, which includes a wide variety of things, including transportation issues, how to get as was mentioned, how to get money for the interstate bridge project, and how to particularly deal with diversion on some of the other projects that we're going to be seeing. So there's a bunch of things like that that are going to be coming up. That's sort of a very quick overview. There will also be a lot of housing, trying to get more, particularly on equitable housing, to get more state funding for housing, to do more tenant protections, and to encourage ownership options, more tools for the local governments to deal with the housing issue on their local thing, more tools and more resources. That's part of our legislative agenda. And so I'm sure as we move forward and we hear from legislative bills, that'll be coming to the MPAC for consideration. Sorry, that's as quick as I can go.
That was pretty good. All right. And a final note here, remind me, Stephen, Mayor Rosner has thrown his hat in the ring to become the new MPAC rep. Is that something we have to vote on, or is this a mayor's thing to do?
I believe that's the mayor's, but I'm going to look to Chris. She's my subject matter. Oh, you're muted.
Yes, it is a mayor's thing. We, same with MPAC, JPAC are mayor's things.
Right. So is there, based on our conversations, I think at our last mayor's meeting, Mayor Rosner said he would do it. Is anyone else who would like to be the MPAC representative?
And just a reminder, Beaverton, the cities of Beaverton and Hillsborough already have seats on MPAC. So I probably will just let the other cities decide who their rep would be.
Right, because Tim would be representing the small cities. On being, he's our rep for the small cities. So Mayor's Lanahan, who's left? Mayor Shirato, Mayor Delin. We all good with Tim being the new MPAC rep? All right, Tim, you're it.
Yeah, we're so small, we're not even on the map.
Bidder, table for one, bidder.
That'll be my first item I bring up at MPAC for you.
All right, well, congratulations, Tim, and thanks for taking that.
No problem. I think my exact words was, if no one else wants to do it, I'll do it. But I'm more than happy to serve. Thank you.
All right. With that, that's all that we have for time for today. We covered the agenda. Thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you next month.
Adios.
Thank you.
Thank you.